Welcome back to NY Flight. In this video, we are joined by Heavy Sports Jets insider Paul Boy Green Eston Jr. Paul, how are you doing today?
What's up, Connor? This is phenomenal. It's finally good to be on the show. First time. Hopefully, it won't be the last time. This is groovy, baby. Yeah.
I totally agree. So there was some news that came out today that Saleh expects his whole coaching staff to be back for next year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yikes. I think we all knew the main characters are coming back, obviously. Sala, Joe Douglas, Nathaniel Hackett. But,
hmm
this was in reference with a conversation with Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated. He was talking about the entire staff being intact. And that's where I'm like, a little questionable here because I think there are a lot of guys you could point at that you're like, maybe they shouldn't be safe. Again, I'm not trying to be the old 1800s medieval guy that's operating, the guillotine to ready to pull, ready to kill somebody, ready to fire somebody. Like, I don't want to be that guy, but Keith Carter, the offensive line coach, that thing has been a disaster, whether it's injuries, whether it's the actual coaching of the results oriented business. That's been terrible. Do you want to swap out a Rob Calabrese or this guy or that guy in terms of some of the positional coaches at certain positions where things haven't necessarily gone so well? And then beyond, in terms of remaining the staff intact, is potentially adding pieces to the puzzle. Do you make Nathaniel Hackett like a senior consultant, assistant head coach, maybe? Do you do something like that where you rearrange the pieces and bring in a fresh offensive mind that has some tip of the cap to Aaron Rodgers, but also to Hackett? Because that could potentially be awkward. But with how bad it's been, I mean, somebody's got to pay for the sins of this horrible offense. So I think that's where probably we should focus. Defense is phenomenal. Jeff Ulbrich, Marquand Manuel, Aaron White Cotton, Rudy, like all those guys on defense, I think are spectacular. But offense, I'd really be surprised if they truly run it back full intact. We'll see if this is Woody Johnson or Joe Douglas stepping in saying, Salah, we got to change something here. The main people could stay the same, but we might have to switch out a piece or two. That's where I would personally say that's where they should go. So this kind of surprised me a little bit. Yeah.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. I mean, Woody was reportedly the one who told Saleh last season that he needs to get rid of Mike LaFleur. I don't know how I know Hackett's coming back, but I don't know how Rodgers can look at the management in the front office and honestly say Hackett deserves to be the offensive coordinator. Rob Calabrese has to go. He shouldn't even have been on the staff in the first place. I think Keith Carter has to go because, like, it doesn't make sense how your offense could be, 30, 31, or 32, whatever we are, offensive line, and the position coach still returns. That's not acceptable. So that's where I stand. I think the coaching staff is not fully intact on the offensive side of the ball, but some guys on the defense, like a year or two, or maybe even this year, and Ulbrich might be knocking on the door of a head coaching job somewhere. All right, that leads me to my next question. Do you want a clean house?
Yes. That's a great question, because when you have a season like this, and this season has been horrible, both analytically, from that perspective, from an offensive standpoint, and then just really, I mean, heading into the year, we all had Super Bowl aspirations. And if you weren't quite that high on the hog like I was, at the very least, ending this playoff drought. And of course, as we know, the Jets were mathematically eliminated. So 13 years in a row of no playoffs for the Jets. That is the longest stretch in franchise history. There have been a lot of bad play for the Jets over the years, but that's the longest stretch ever, is this current 13 years. This is the worst that it's ever been. So there is a case to be made to clean house here. To me, ultimately, though, I think Woody Johnson made the right decision by informing the New York Post that they're running the band back together with, again, the main characters of Saleh, Douglas, and Hackett. You have no other choice. I mentioned this on another show that for me, I am a pot committed kind of guy. When I commit to something, I'm all in. The Jets committed to the Aaron Rodgers experience. They brought in coaches, Hackett. They brought in players that are with Rodgers from the past, Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, players of that nature. And there's more, Billy Turner and so many others. And you tried to make it as familiar and comfortable as an experience as possible. Unfortunately, none of us could have saw this coming. 4 plays in, Aaron Rodgers is done for the year. Then all of a sudden, this thing folds like a cheap suit. And it was terrible. but you have to see this thing through, because if the Jets are as all in as they say, and they are pushing all their chips in the middle of the table and they're going to try to win this thing. If you're going to do that, your best path to winning is running it back. Because the worst thing that could happen is you fire everybody, which, by the way, I just want to say, if you're going to clean house, you need to do it completely, top to bottom. I'm talking about ordering the 1-800 maid service cleaning. You can't just fire select people, in my opinion, like Saleh and then keep Douglas, or keep Saleh and fire Douglas. Either way, no matter what way, you clean it all and you wipe the slate clean, or you run it all back. I think those are your only two options. You're doing half measures if you do it any other way. I think the Jets are making the right decision to run this full group back and see what happens. Now, 2024 is all in or nothing. There's no excuses. Even if Rodgers gets hurt again, this staff is effed. This team is effed. It's playoff mandate and beyond, I believe. Ending the playoffs should be a big goal for this team because, again, 13 years without the playoffs. But they should be pursuing and trying to get a championship. They should be trying to make a deep playoff run. That should be the mandate. And if they don't do that, all of these heads are going to be rolling Game of Thrones style, and heads are going to roll. People are going to be fired, and we're starting brand spanking new, which would be heading into 2025. So, no, I don't want to clean house right now. I think Woody Johnson's making the right move, bringing this group back together.
I couldn't agree with you more, but let's look at Joe Douglas first.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe Douglas, let's look at the positives before we look at the negatives. Positives. That Jamal Adams trade he made, one of the best trades ever.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely fleeced the Seahawks in that trade. He is a healthy inactive for the Seahawks right now. That was great by Joe Douglas. He was a great player at the time. Boom, deal him, won that trade. He had the best 2022 draft class you could ask for. Sauce, Garrett Wilson, defensive and offensive rookie of the years. Breece Hall, who would have possibly won rookie of the year if he stayed healthy. I mean, that draft class was incredible. But let's go to the negatives. Joe Douglas could win his next 27 games as the GM for the New York Jets, and he will still have a losing record. That's just terrible. And then also, he knows nothing about drafting offensive linemen. The two leaders in sacks given up on the offensive line are Mekhi Becton and Andre Dillard. And Andre Dillard is someone he drafted for the Eagles. That just shows he knows nothing about offensive linemen. But I think we give them a mulligan year, one more year, run it back. I know Hackett's returning, but I really don't think he should. I think we need to bring in, if we keep him titled as offensive coordinator, we need to bring in someone senior who can maybe call the plays, but we still title Hackett offensive coordinator. All right.
That makes sense. Just to jump in on that real quick, I would say the only snafu potentially is you have to make sure that it's a Rodgers style offense coming in, because if not, then you're asking Aaron Rodgers to relearn a brand new thing at this stage of his career, which obviously is not impossible. We saw that with Bruce Arians and Tom Brady, but it just sets you up. That's why I said, for bringing the band back together and trying to make some things happen in a continuous sense, is running it back with the same offense. So if you bring someone from the same family, maybe you could call plays a little bit differently, as we spoke about earlier. But I think that's the biggie. That's the biggie. We'll see, though, if the Jets are even willing to go in those waters.
I agree. All right, now let's go on to the offseason. What do you think are the three major position rooms we need to make additions to this offseason?
Yeah, offense, baby. But specifically on positions, offensive line, of course, as an overall unit. Both of your starting tackles are scheduled to be free agents. That is Mekhi Becton and Dwayne Brown. And as we're doing this conversation, Dwayne Brown was placed on IR. His season's officially over for the New York Jets. And I would imagine his NFL career is over for both the New York Jets and the NFL as a whole. So both your free agents, Mekhi Becton's the other one, they're scheduled to be free agents. One will retire, and then one, I think, will go on to greener pastures and go somewhere else. So that's automatically two vacancies that you need from the offensive tackle perspective. Then we go to the other players. Elijah Tucker is coming off a serious injury. Will he be ready for the start of the season? Is he playing guard or tackle? That's a question we need to answer. Joe Tippmann's going to be your starting center. He's there. But what about Lincoln Tomlinson? If you move on from him, you could save $8.1 million in cap space. not bad, but you eat 10 million in dead cap. Ugh. So like, what do you do there? That's all. If we want to do another criticism of Joe Douglas, it's the restructures that didn't work out. CJ Uzama, Lake and Tomlinson, moving money around. So when you move on from those players, there will still be dead cap to be accounted for. Those were questionable cap restructures by the wizard he is, general manager Joe Douglas. So you need a minimum of 2 starters, maybe 3 plus depth. So offensive line, 100%. You need to make sure what happened in week 1 does not happen again. In a little bit of a sense, it was fluky because of, the style of blocking those 2 tackles did with cut blocks and then Aaron Rodgers holding on to the football. So a little bit of it was fluky, but still, it's the breadth of it that this offensive line for the majority of this season has not been able to protect. So offensive line's number 1. And this may seem a little too aggressive, but backup quarterback, that is very high on my priority list.
I
And they got to
agree.
vet out some options. Yeah, you should agree because there's a couple of guys that may be out there. Jameis Winston, Gardner Minshew, Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill obviously has a connection to Todd Downing. Minshew has been marvelous this year. Winston hasn't gotten his opportunity, but he has just a ton of talent as a former number 1 overall pick. So depending on your flavor, maybe there's options beyond that the Jets potentially are considering. But you need a proven veteran backup who's got a remarkable track record that can be your guy. So if Rodgers gets hurt again, that you're not totally effed immediately from the get-go, that you have a fighting chance. And especially in this scenario, let's just assume Rodgers doesn't get hurt again for the season. But what if he misses a game or two? It's a 17-game season. That's a long year. There's a lot of backups that have had to step in for either small periods of time. You need a guy that could step in and deliver from that perspective. So the quarterback room needs to be totally redone. You have Aaron Rodgers. You got to get a veteran backup. I'm trading Zach Wilson. See ya. He's gone. And then you got to draft a guy on day 3 of the draft in 2024. So that's something else you have to do. And finally, my third, and it's all on the offensive side of the ball for me. Sure, there's a couple of changes you can make on defense. May need to rotate some interior defensive line depth. Quentin Jefferson being a free agent. Who's coming in? You have Al Woods was another one. Safety. Jordan Whitehead's a free agent. Ashton Davis is a free agent. You may have to move some safety pieces around, but the attention should be on the offense. And the other one is wide receiver 2. Who the hell are the Jets getting for wide receiver 2? They need a guy because Lazard has proven not to be the guy. And Garrett Wilson, he's Batman. He's a freaking superstar out there. But where the hell is Robin? That's what I'm asking. We're having a Justice League meeting. Where the hell is Robin? They need another guy in that wide receiver room. No question about it. So offense, offense, offense. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think for the offensive line, I have 4 guys that I like in free
Ooh,
agency:
okay.
Graham
Blame on me.
Glasgow, Trent
Okay.
Brown,
Mm-hmm.
Robert Hunt, and Jonah Williams. Those are the 4 guys I like in free agency. Now we're going over to the draft. In the draft, the guys that I like are Joe Alt,
Yeah.
Olufashanu. Those are 2, but
Nice.
they're
Yeah,
the
sure. Mm-hmm.
chances that we're there, or the chances that they're available when we get to our pick, kind of slim. If they're not available, Tylese Fuega and JC Latham are my 2 other guys, and we need to pick Zinter with that 3rd round pick. He's going to be one of the best guards in the league, fully developed.
Wow. Okay. Connor with the take. Spicy. Okay.
And then,
Drafty. I like it. Okay.
and then when we go to backup quarterback, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, those guys, Jameis Winston,
Mm-hmm.
sign one of them. I even like to bring back. I don't have a problem bringing back Sam Darnold. He's a free
Oh,
agent.
hey. Okay, Sammy. All right.
I think we sign one of them, and then we draft Jordan Travis, 4th round from
Oh, nice.
FSU, and then they compete for the QB2, QB3 spot in camp and free agency, and then they fight for 2nd and 3rd string. But I do agree there are some cuts that have to be made, like Uzama. I think he's a June 1 cut. You do
Mm-hmm.
have to shuffle some things around. I think Ashton Davis comes back. He's been incredible.
Yeah. Love
I think
Ashton.
yes, I love him too. I think Solomon Thomas deserves another 1-year deal. I think he's looked very good. I want Al Woods back, but I think he retires. And like you said about Dwayne Brown, I just saw it. He's on IR now, out for the season. Probably not. I know he's not coming back and playing in the NFL ever again. It shows how bad he's must have looked that he cannot even crack this starting offensive line. That just shows how bad he's looked.
It's a good
And
point. Yeah.
and what you said about the wide receivers leads me to my next question. You could have any wide receiver 2 for next season. Who would it be?
Oh boy, oh boy. I mean, this is such a critical question to answer. There's a lot of sexy options out there because there's whatever flavor you're looking for. There's youth. T. Higgins is a name that will spark a lot of people. I don't know if the Bengals are going to end up franchise tagging him. Do they let him walk? Is it a tag and trade? There's a lot of possibilities there, but he's young. He's been wildly inconsistent. Sometimes he drops a slant, but makes a crazy one-handed catch. So there's a little bit of that volatility with a guy that young, but he's been super productive and he's young, which again, coming off his rookie deal is probably when you most ideally want to bring free agents in. Then there's some older guys. Okay. If you're, you're not an ageist and you don't mind, an age is just a number. Mike Evans, he's across the 30 mark, but he's been spectacular. Talk about consistency. He's had all kinds of quarterbacks in Tampa Bay rotating through there, and he's consistently put up production. That could be a solid number. He's been an anti-diva. You don't hear him complain about targets all the time. At least I haven't. So he's a guy that could come in, whether it's Rodgers or anybody, can just deliver. So that part to me is very intriguing and tantalizing. There's more underrated names like Michael Pittman Jr. He's another possibility of a guy that could potentially be in the mix. And then, of course, the sexiest name is Devontae Adams. And I would lie. I know Jet fans seem to be split kind of 50-50 on this. Half of them want Devontae Adams because it's sexy and he's already got chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. And the other half don't because he's expensive, contractually speaking. It would cost you an asset. He is contractually obligated to another team. T. Higgins is a free agent. Pittman's a free agent. Some of these other names that I've mentioned are free agents. So, like Adams, you'd have to give up some sort of asset. You'd have to pay him, of course. So there's a lot of moving parts from that perspective. But count me in the camp, and maybe it's naive. I'd love to see Devontae Adams here. Garrett Wilson's going to go from jersey number 17 to number 5, which means 17 will be available. That's the same number of Devontae Adams. Sign me the hell up. Now, the problem is, and this is a Joe Douglas problem, not a Boy Green problem, is how do you figure it out? Your first round pick right now is the top 10. That's too rich for me to give up for Devontae. You don't have a second round pick. Will the Raiders take a third and change? Probably not. So you're going to have to get wicked creative if that's going to be a reality with a combination of like a third this year and like some future compensation that maybe is incentive laden so you can kind of build it around that. But it's a complicated deal because unless Devontae Adams just walks into the Raiders office and says, I'm playing for the Jets or nobody, so you guys better make it happen, he would need some Aaron Rodgers influence probably to swing that. But Devontae would be a sexy one, and I would love T. Higgins. You may have to overpay for him in free agency if he reaches the open market. But if we end up with one of those two, sign me the hell up, baby.
I agree with you when it comes to T. Higgins. I actually am going to disagree with you when it comes to Devontae Adams. He's a 31-year-old receiver. The years probably I'm gonna go the contract he'd want would probably be around 3 years, $90 million. With a few restructures, we could make that work. Maybe CJ Mosley and JFM, maybe we restructure those two. We can make that contract work. What I'm worried about is the age and the draft capital we'd have to give up. We'd have to basically send our whole future out to Vegas to bring in a 31-year-old receiver. Maybe we get 3 years, 4 years out of him. That's what I can see us getting out of him. But now we're going back, staying on the offensive side of the ball, but going to the offensive line. What is the solution for fixing this offensive line?
I'm going to be honest. If I could solve this question, I feel like I'd be living in a mansion somewhere or something, being paid rich, handsomely, and being fed grapes from some sort of, waiter or something of that sort. But the fact of the matter is this. Let's get down to the brass tacks. The guy back to Dwayne Brown or gone. See ya. I think they keep Lakin. I just think that, sure, you could save a little by moving on, but you'd also lose some with the dead cap. So I think they are going to hold on to him. And I know he has not played well, obviously, at all, but he's been incredibly reliable from a participation standpoint where you may say, Paul, what's the big deal? Well, look at every other offensive lineman on this team who hasn't been available. So Lakin's best ability is availability and being out there every week. I think what will help Lakin is going to be part of my other solution to the offensive line. It's the same thing for Connor McGovern. When Connor McGovern was the starting center for the Jets and he had crappy guys around him like Greg Van Roten, like he sucked. Okay. All right. He had other bad guys around him, so he had to be constantly thinking about their roles and assignments because he knew they weren't very good. So he had to overstretch. When he had good players around him, all of a sudden Connor McGovern's play increased. Coincidence? No, there is no coincidence. What happened is he had better players around him, which raised his own level of play. So for Lakin, I believe getting a stout left tackle, which I believe will be coming in the 2024 NFL draft. That's solution number one. First round pick is going right into the trenches, and we will see where the
Great.
Jets end up. Obviously, the two names that we've talked about a little bit before, Joe Alt of Notre Dame and Fashanu of Penn State. One of those two, if you can end up with them. And I think it's possible because there's a crazy quarterback craze. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. You got Michael Penix. I mean, you have all these quarterbacks that could go. You have Marvin Harrison. He's going to go somewhere. All of a sudden, you start adding Jared Verse as a nasty pass rusher. He's going to
Yes.
go. And all it takes is a little bit of beep, boop, 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 boop. Oh, holy crap. One of these two tackles on the board. And if I'm Joe Douglas, I run my fat ass right up to that podium. Again, excuse my Guatemalan, but I run right up to that podium and I cash that pick in because that is a slam dunk. Just get your franchise tackle for the next decade plus. Hope he's half the player DeBrickashaw Ferguson was when you brought him in, and you have your left tackle forever. So that's solution number one. And like I said, the kind of riff off of that solution is I think that will increase the play of Lakin. So there you go. Yeah, first round pick, left tackle. That's your left tackle. Lakin, I think, stays. Center is Joe Tippmann. Now the question is, and it's this: is AVT playing right guard or is he playing right tackle? I think he can play either. I think he has the capabilities of doing it, and it might be easier for the Jets to find a suitable replacement at guard than tackle. And if that's the case, you could kick AVT out to right tackle and then get a suitable guard. It may be easier from that standpoint. Personally, I just keep AVT at right guard and say, you know what? I want you to be the best right guard of all time, and the versatility is cool. And if we have to use that in a break the glass emergency, fine. But I don't want to get into a rhythm, get into a habit of using AVT all over the place. It can't be good for him. It can't be good for anybody. It's good for the emergency short term, but they got to be thinking long term for this guy because they have to exercise his fifth year option coming up in May. So insert random veteran cheap guard. That's probably what I would do. And Carter Warren would be my swing tackle next year. He's shown a little bit of chutzpah, can play the left or right side, and he can replace Max Mitchell as your sixth man. If we're talking about a basketball sense, you have your five, and then Carter Warren's a six that can plug in where need be at swing tackle. So that would be the plan to fix the offensive line to find the Jets. Yes, sir.
I really agree with you on that one.
Okay.
I think Alton and Fashanu, there's a chance they're still available. I mean, Dallas Turner is gonna go, like you said, Jared Verse. Um, there's a chance Kool-Aid McKinstry goes. Just it takes one or two little shufflings of what everyone has predicted as the mock draft. Just one or two picks don't go that way, and or Fashanu are available when they come to the Jets. But I agree with everything you said when it comes to what we like, who we draft, blah blah blah. That leads me to my next question. If you're Joe Douglas, what should we do in the draft? What's your strategy? Who do we pick round by round? Do you go wide receiver? What day 3 quarterback do you want? Do you want to go quarterback in the 3rd round? Do you want to go quarterback in the 1st round? Unlikely, as you just said, you want to go offensive lineman. But what are you doing if you are Joe Douglas?
Well, I think decision number one is to decide whether to stay where you're picking. And again, I get that's still volatile. It's still up in the air where ultimately the Jets pick based on the final 2 weeks of the regular season. But depending on where you pick, Joe Douglas has to make a determination. And this doesn't have to be rock steady because anything could happen. A draft call, trade call could happen on the draft. You're like, okay, let's do this thing. But he has to decide. Let's say they pick at right now, they pick at 9. Let's say they stay at 9. Okay, are we trading back and recouping the second round pick we lost in the Aaron Rodgers trade to give us more lottery tickets? Because again, I think the Jets need help. Or do you just stand pat and take a guy? Here's my take. If I think there are a limited amount of guys in this draft, call them, I don't know, 6-ish blue chippers, where you're just like, these guys are absolute studs. The couple of quarterbacks, so Caleb Drake. You could throw the 2 tackles in there. You have Marvin Harrison Jr., the wide receiver, and then throw in who's your 6 guys at, Neighbors, the wide receiver out of LSU. Is there another offensive lineman you love a lot? If one of those guys are on the board, I run the pickup and I secure it because, again, in my scenario, I believe the offensive linemen are one of the 2 that would slip. You run that pickup and do it. If all those guys that you value in a 1%er kind of way above all the other guys in the draft, then you take that player. But if they're not available, then you could say, okay, let's trade back. Someone else is going to want one of these quarterbacks. Someone else is going to want something. Drop to the mid-teens, maybe early 20s if you have to. You get that first round pick from the trade swap. You get a second round pick and then extra assets. And then you have more, swings at the pinata, so to speak. So I think that's the major first decision for Joe Douglas right off the top that he's going to have to decide ultimately. And again, my strategy is if one of those guys are there, I'm taking the player. If not, I'm trading back and again, getting more swings. I think to me personally, quarterback is completely off the table. Aaron Rodgers, at a minimum, is coming back for 2024. He's confirmed that. And he said he wants to have at least 2 years. So that would be 2024 and 2025. So he wouldn't even be thinking, in theory, about the next starting quarterback of the Jets until the 2026 season. And Saleh said, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year. He's like, he could play until he's like 1,000, basically. So if that's the case, why waste a pick that you could, you draft whatever quarterback you want, whoever you like, Jaden, Drake May slips, Caleb, whoever, whatever, it doesn't matter. But whoever your guy was, you take him. And in theory, in a perfect world scenario, that player never touches the field for the next 2 or 3 years. What the hell? We just had that with Will McDonald, who's barely getting on the field as is. You're going to have the arrogance to take another player of that nature in a win now mode of a player that's break the glass. That to me is wild. Plus, if you even think about it, most of these rookies are going to need time. So you're going to play with Aaron Rodgers. He gets hurt, and then you go to a rookie to save your season. That seems a little, it seems a little far-fetched, to be honest with you. So to me, quarterback's completely off the board. I love like guys like Connor Rogers out there in the universe who's pounding the table. If the Jets somehow had a path to one of those top 2 quarterbacks, Caleb or Drake, he would take the quarterback, and I respect him. He does the draft for a living. But for me personally, this is an all-in year. I'm all in for right now. And basically the entire strategy for the draft is completely committing to the offense side of the ball. I'm not taking a defender with any of these picks. I don't care when the pick is. It's offensive line. It's backup quarterbacks. So go to day 3. You mentioned a guy like Jordan Travis. Fine. Perfect guy if you want to take on a day 3. And you could do it a little bit in the Hendon Hooker mold of the Lions. They took him, knew he was injured, but just kind of get some value for him. Like Travis obviously got hurt. That's why they didn't make the college football playoff, and take a chance on a guy because you're hoping Rodgers obviously does not get hurt and you'll let him bide his time. You get a talented player at a discount. That's fine with me if you want to go in the Jordan Travis route. But the entire draft strategy is offense. Quarterback's completely off the board in the first round. And then the decision of trade back or attack is a big decision for old Joe Douglas. Yes, sir.
I agree with you. I think offensive line obviously is priority, and I have one more point to make before we wrap it up. I have it's a hot take alert.
Hey now, okay.
So, if you look at all the PFF grades and all the statistics from the last couple of weeks, obviously no one on the offensive line other than Tippmann has been good or healthy this season. The hot take is Jake Hansen is the second best player on this offensive line right now behind Tippmann. So,
wow.
The Hansen just let up 0 pressures this week. I know everyone's going to be like, oh, signed him out of Green Bay midway through the season. It's because this offensive line's terrible. Everyone made like a joke of the signing. He's actually been one of the best players. I think Mekhi Becton has been probably the worst player. He's right next to Billy Turner for the worst player on this offensive line. I think Lakin, there's no excuse to give up 11 pressures against the 32 ranked defense. There's just no excuse for that. And they traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young.
Young, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Imagine if he was up against Chase Young or Sweat. That would have been 22 pressures rather 13. I mean, there's just no excuse for that.
Yeah. I would just say, just to add on, Mekhi Becton has allowed the most sacks of a single player on the Jets since Wayne Hunter. When you're doing Wayne Hunter references, that's never good. And then on your Jake Hansen point, he's been a nice find. He's been a really solid guy for the New York Jets. And again, in a perfect world, I don't think he's starting in 2024, but hopefully you found some, because that's really what the season is about now that we're at the end of this thing, is that you're mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. So now as you're riding out guys, you're trying to find out who are the capable pieces for 2024? Who can we build around? Who could be key reserve? Who could be this? And who needs to be gone, which is also an important determination to make. This guy sucks.
I
Let's move
agree.
on. This guy has a little spark. Okay, let's do something. For instance, Carter Warren, who's finally back healthy. I think he will continue with these final two opportunities. It'll be a big test on Thursday night against this nasty Cleveland Browns defense. But I think he's done enough, in my opinion, to be okay. We found our swing tackle. He can replace the Max Mitchell basically and be that sixth guy. Okay, perfect. Is he? We'll see from a health perspective how he is, but he showed a lot of pop in the Washington game and even some other opportunities. Those first couple of steps are like, okay, that looks different. Maybe he could be the change of pace guy next year when you mix in somebody else. Bring in, you have Brees Hall, bring in a veteran like Aaron Jones if he gets cut, and then your third guy hopefully could be like an Izzy. Like that would be phenomenal if that can happen. So these final couple games are about evaluating guys' roles. Back, gone, starter, reserve, whatever the case may be. I think that's an important determination. So if I had to rate, the sizzling of your hot take, I stick my old temperature gauge in that. That's a spicy meatball. That is a wow. Okay, Connor, that's what I'm talking about. I've not heard that anywhere else, but I got to tell you, it is a spicy take because it's like, whoa, because it sounds sexy on the surface. But then when you really, as you mentioned, look at the numbers, look at the analytics, you're not talking out of your wazoo here. I mean, this is a guy who name value is a zero. Jake Hansen, who the hell's that? If there was like one of those police lines, or I pick out Jake Hansen from this group, I'm like, boy, I'm not really sure who Jake Hansen is out of all these random people. But the fact of the matter is the Jets may have stumbled into a nice gem here, and the Jets can never have enough offensive alignment. So that'd be a nice depth. I like this one to take. Very nice. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it's just pure analytics. I mean, he's been very, very, very solid for this unhealthy, depleted offensive line. And there's one way to put it. The coaching this season has been abysmal. I don't care if Aaron Rodgers is not playing. The coaching has been abysmal. And one more thing before we let you go, what is your prediction for tomorrow's game? I just hope it's nothing like the Falcons or the Dolphins tobacco.
Oh yeah, that would be a disaster. As I mentioned earlier, again, I am rooting for wins. I'm rooting for this team to go after it and think about all of the storylines. Obviously, there's Elijah Moore, there's Joe Flacco. The Browns, if they win or tie, I just saw this from NFL PR. If they win or tie against the Jets, they punch their ticket officially to the playoffs. We don't know about division or anything like that. All that will be figured out. But just a ticket of one of the 7 AFC playoff tickets to the dance, they would punch in with the winner tie. If you're the Jets, again, you've been eliminated from the playoffs. Where's your pride? Where's your dignity? You are on a prime time national stage, short week on the road. It's incredibly difficult. In these moments, one of two things can happen. One, you either rally around each other and you go, okay, it's us against the world, baby. Let's do this thing. Or you fold like a used lawn chair. You fall over like a sack of potatoes. That is one of two things that can happen. Me personally, I think this team's going to rally. I think they could get after Joe Flacco. I think he's incredibly immobile. I think he struggles on the move. Jet fans know that better than anybody. So if he could get some of that interior pocket pressure, some of that Quinnen Williams on the inside, which pushes him to try to scramble earlier, Bryce Huff on the edge, Jermaine Johnson on the edge, Will McDonald potentially in spots could come around the edge and cause them havoc. I think that mitigates the Browns offense. And then all the Jets offense has to do is capitalize on short fields and then just don't turn the ball over. Trevor Siemian threw a horrible interception in the red zone. He fumbled the ball, all over the place. As long as he doesn't give those gifts on a silver platter, I believe Joe Flacco will be giving those gifts to the Jets defense. I have the Jets pulling off the upset, winning 21-19. I think the Jets have a remarkable showing on Thursday Night Football, their final primetime game of the season.
I agree with you. We need to get after Joe Flacco. I see the Jets winning 28-21. I think we have some touchdowns. I mean, honestly, in week 18, I know we're talking about week 17, but I would love to see Brett Rippon in week 18 if Zach's not available. Obviously, I'd like to see Zach, but there's no way they play him against that Patriots team. It's half of his career interceptions against the Patriots. I want to see Brett Rippon because he's much more entertaining than to watch Trevor Siemian play football, and he just doesn't care. He pushes the ball downfield. Trevor Siemian doesn't air the ball out further than 10 yards.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the yards per attempt was like 4 against the Washington Commanders. I mean, it was pathetic. And to throw another thing on that, I would just love to see the legend of Garrett Wilson grow. He's 42 yards
Yes.
away from his second consecutive 1,000-yard season. He is on pace to catch 100 balls this year. He would be only the second Jets receiver ever to do that. Brandon Marshall did it with 109 in 2015. That's the league leader for the Jets all time in a single season. So no one else has ever caught 100 balls except for Brandon Marshall. So I'd love to see that for Garrett, because another quarterback means he would have 8 quarterbacks who have been in games with Garrett Wilson in his first 2 seasons. That is unbelievable. That's a future trivia. Can you name the 8 quarterbacks that Garrett Wilson played with in his first 2 years in the league? So the fact that he's putting up numbers, he's putting up with all kinds of crazy ass things happening at quarterback, and then hopefully in 2024 he has one quarterback, and that's Aaron Rodgers all year long. He deserves it. The fans deserve it. We deserve to see. We saw it in spots, of course, the Giants preseason game, that beautiful touchdown pass and things of that nature. So I would love to see Rippon for all those reasons you mentioned. He's exciting. He has a YOLO, F it mentality, just throw the pigskin all over the football field. And because, like I said, it would just make Garrett Wilson look even more impressive to have another quarterback added to that list.
I totally agree with you. Boy Green, thank you for joining us. I hope we see you again. Thank you for watching, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.